And then if you don't have an Orthodox Study Bible, it would be Psalm 20. And we'll do like we always do. We'll start by reading it all the way through, and then we'll go verse by verse. And this is a pretty short one, so maybe we'll get to the next psalm, maybe not. All right, so Psalm 19. For the end, a psalm by David. We'll remember, what does for the end mean? What did St. Gregory of Nyssa teach us? For the end means regarding the Messiah, right? The end of all things, the purpose. And remember, it's not the end like for the end of the story as we think of it, but for the end, the purpose, the thing to which everything's pointing, the goal, right? So whenever we see something like this, we know we're talking about the Messiah, the coming of our Lord. And then it says a psalm by David. So we're going to have a king's perspective, right? He's speaking in a kingly voice, which allows us to kind of hear Christ through his words. Hey, Conrad.
How are you?
Doing well, thank God. Yourself?
Good.
Good. All right, so here we go. May the Lord hear you in the day of affliction. May the name of the God of Jacob defend you. May he send you help from his holy place. And may he support you from Zion. May he remember every sacrifice of yours. And may your whole burnt offering be honored. And it says pause, Selah. It's a musical reference there. May he give you according to your heart. May he fulfill all your counsel. We will greatly rejoice in your salvation. In the name of our God, we will be magnified. Now I know the Lord has saved his anointed. He will hear him from his holy heaven. The salvation of his right hand is mighty. Some glory in chariots, some in horses. But in the name of the Lord our God, we shall be magnified. Their feet were tied together, so they fell. But we rose up and were restored. O Lord, save your King, and hear us in the day we call upon you.
This one's in the Catechismus of the Presanctified,
Yeah, good job. Wow. All right. So Emmy was pointing out that this is read during Great Lent. It's consistently read during Great Lent at the Presanctified Divine Liturgy. Nice, man. And that's important for us, right? Because in Great Lent, we're getting prepared for the salvation of our King, for the trial that he is going through, that he is preparing himself for, right? And so we are preparing. So as we get started here, we want to kind of just take a big picture look at the psalm, because you'll notice the psalm seems to be in the voice of the Israelites, and they're praying for their king, right? Like he's going into battle. It keeps talking about, may the Lord hear your prayers, may he protect you out of Zion. But there's references to, keeping the nations safe and so on and so forth. So the last line being the giveaway, O Lord, save your King and hear us in the day we call upon you, right? So he's writing as David, but he's putting it into the voice of the people. It's a psalm for God, right? It would be sung in the temple, or it would be sung in the synagogue. So it's definitely that, but it's also a royal psalm because it's talking very clearly about the Messiah, which that's how it starts, tells us that anyway. So let's go ahead and move through it. May the Lord hear you in the day of affliction. May the name of the God of Jacob defend you. Israel prays before the king enters conflict, and so we've got to keep in mind that we now, as the church, we pray as Christ enters, right, into battle. And what is Christ doing battle against? Of course, in his earthly sojourn, he was doing battle against demons, right? Against the ailments of the people, right? And now that continues, but it's expanded now also to the sins and passions in each one of our own lives, right? So as we call out to the Lord and we think about the king leading his army into battle, a lot of time we don't think about the fact that God is actually in us, deploying his armies against the things in our life that have us bound, that have us enslaved, right? You're all probably getting used to hearing this because we're starting to see trends in the psalm. Pretty soon you're not going to need me to teach the class. You all could I'll just do 1 week where I don't prepare anything, and you all can tell me what it means. But it's really interesting, this next phrase, may the name of the God of Jacob defend you. Because you don't really think about a name being a weapon. But the name of God is a weapon. In the old covenant, it was really clear, this idea that to say the name of God is to bring him near, to bring him into that moment. Because since God is in all places, of course, he can be anywhere. And so he is where his people call upon him. So his name, usually in Scripture, means things like his presence, his authority, his saving power. And we can even think about this in terms of like an emissary for a king. Like if a king's emissary comes to town, he can often sign legal documents for the king, and he stamps it with the king's insignia. It's law. The king never saw it, but it's law because this guy has the power to put his name on the document. Maybe you have somebody in your family who can do that, right? Somebody who's allowed to sign the other person's name. Now that person has the same authority as if it were me, myself, right? Or we might think of like a power of attorney. When someone's incapacitated, suddenly this power of attorney is as good a word as the sick person's word, right? This is a way for us to understand it. But it's also important to understand that this idea of the name having power goes to the Jesus prayer. Goes to the power of Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And it's interesting because in the Old Covenant in Genesis, when we fall away from God, it says, right after the Cain and Abel episode, it says, and then people began to call upon the name of the Lord. There's this idea that to call upon God's name is what constitutes his worshipers. Isn't that cool? So the Jesus prayer ends up being a weapon. It's an offensive weapon against the demons and against our passions and against sin and all those things that afflict. Hi. Welcome. It's good to see you. Yeah. So, and then there's this really big fulfillment of this prophecy. I didn't talk about it as a prophecy. We all know that, right? We call David the prophet David, the holy prophet David, because he's not merely a king. He's not merely, a holy person, a saint. We refer to him as the prophet David because we realize that he's receiving these messages from his own apprehension of God, his own viewing, his own seeing of God, and then reporting it back to us. In John 17:11, though, okay, so John 17, if you remember, this is Jesus' high priestly prayer. This is the last prayer that he says before he begins to then ascend Golgotha, right? To go to that great and final victory that's going to save us. But in verse 11, 17:11, we have, now I am no longer in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to you. So he's talking about the apostles and the disciples and then the rest of us by extension. He says, Holy Father, keep them through your name, those whom you have given me, that they may be one as we are. So there's power in the name of God. To call upon God is to bring him into our present, into our line of sight, you could say something like that. But again, keeping them in your name. And it's important then as we understand this is notice, Jesus never promises us that we will not endure affliction. It says, may the Lord hear you in the day of affliction, and may the name of the God of Jacob defend you. So this is not a promise that we would be somehow removed from the warfare or removed from the difficulties, but rather that in the difficulties that God would come to fight for us inside the difficulties, right? This is how we meet God. This is how we see God. I'm sure you all notice, but like when our life is going pretty well, a lot of times it's unclear. We aren't as thankful. We're not aware of all that God is doing, although he's doing all of it. Right? We know that in retrospect, especially when things are going good for a while and then bad for a while. We always, he was protecting me so much before, and I only notice it now. But this is a good reminder that in our afflictions, and we call upon the name of the Lord, he defends us. Not that we will not undergo afflictions, not that we will not have hard times, or that we get to escape those hard times inherently. We don't know. That's God's business. What God decides to do, but we're not going to be enveloped by our enemy. Right? All right. Are there any questions on that as we go through? That was kind of a heavy kind of concept. But the name of the Lord, calling upon the name of the Lord, goes all the way back to the Genesis, like right out of the gate. This is what it means to be. I hear someone knock. Someone is definitely knocking. Thanks, Dean. Sorry. Okay. Verse.
Where is your opposite? The other.
Okay, we'll let it go. All right, verse 2 or 3. No, you already did 2, so let's do 3. May he send you help from his holy place, and may he support you from Zion. All right, so we want to, this is something that's also hard for us to understand in our modern American kind of way of understanding. In the Old Testament, if someone were to ask, where does God live? You could have given a street address. Okay? God lived in the temple. It was a location. It was his house. Right? Now God is everywhere, but there was this one specific place that was his house. And this is where we seek him. This is where we call upon his name. This is where we bring sacrifices. And remember, sacrifices are not things that hurt us, things that we have to give God and that feel bad, and then so that he can punish them and take away our sins. Sacrifices are a gift to God. It's a food gift. It's a dinner. Say, God, I brought dinner. And God says, this is wonderful. Thank you. And he has his priest take the food, put it on the grill. The priest cooks it up. And then what's not given to God is given back to the people, and they have dinner with God. That's what a sacrifice is. So if you wanted to go have dinner at God's house, you might bring a goat or whatever was the appropriate sacrifice for whatever you were doing. And you would give it to the priest, and he would prepare something, whether it's a loaf of bread or whether it's a goat. And he would put it on the grill, and he would give it back, and you and your family would sit and eat with God at his house. Okay? In the Old Covenant, it's really important for us to understand this, because the thing about like a holy place, like a church, right, as being a holy place, or our icon corner as a holy place as opposed to other places in our house, that reality that we feel in our heart is a reality. We know, I don't know about you, if you have a prayer corner in your house and you pray in front of that all the time, if you're having a hard time with sin and you walk across your prayer corner, right, you're like, oh, right, it kind of hits you. You're like, oh, goodness, God lives here. Or if it's our prayer time, sometimes if we're struggling with sin, we might have a hard time going into our prayer corner. So we don't want to face God there. Like, not that he's not everywhere, but right here, this is where we meet. This is where we have dinner. This is serious. Well, so too at church. This is why churches, right, we're offering these sacrifices weekly and more often than that during certain times of the year. And so it's a holy place where God meets his people. That's why it feels like serious business when we go in there. And it is. And it's also why when we're having a hard time praying, sometimes the best thing we can do is just get ourselves to church. Because that place can help us to do that thing that our heart needs to do, is having a hard time at home or whatever. And then we can take that home and take it home, right? That's the point. But in the Old Covenant, there's this idea that God had a street address, and it's the temple. And then we can extend that to the idea then that in the New Testament, that this physical reality, right, this thing that we live in, that we have that same experience. We can't just act like, the old story of, well, I find God on the golf course, right? There's nothing, you should have a relationship with God on the golf course. That's fine. But it is not the same as the prayer corner. It is not the same as church. It is not the same as the temple. Back then, there was no question. There's no question. You want to meet God, you go bring him dinner, and you can sit down with him and have whatever conversation you need to have, right? And we don't think of it that way either, because our whole understanding in modern American Christianity is that sacrifice is about appeasing an angry God. But that's not what it is. It's about bringing dinner to someone's house and having dinner with them and having a conversation, right? So if we kind of take all the muck away from us and we understand this better, then we know what's going on at church, right? We come to church every week, and what happens? We bring bread and wine to Jesus. Jesus makes it his body and blood and then shares it with us, right? We eat with God. So it's a beautiful image. And so this idea of may he send you help from his holy place. So this is the idea that this is where God acts. He acts from the temple. He acts from his place. This is David, so it would have been the tabernacle, and then under Solomon, a temple. May he support you from Zion. So Zion is the larger apparatus, the location of at the time of David, of the tabernacle, of the time of Solomon, the temple. So likewise, then, we would understand the same thing in sort of the church, right? The holy place being where the sacrifice is given, and Zion, that whole picture of what the church is in the world. This is really interesting. So as I told you all last week, I'm rereading the life of David just to refresh in some things, which has been kind of fun because I'm teaching the Psalms and we're reading a lot of his Psalms. And there's something that keeps coming up in his story is that whenever he has to go to battle, he asks the priest for the ephod, which is basically my stole. And he takes the stole and he asks God a question and God answers. It's really interesting. It keeps happening. It's over and over in his life. He gets the ephod and he asks God, and then God answers. This is important for a few reasons. One, David's not a priest. He has no business being with the ephod, period. But he has that privilege as the Lord's anointed, which is really cool because we see that with Christ, right? He's from the tribe of Judah, but he's ultimately the high priest of the church, which is kind of cool. But in the same way for us, we can't act like the old covenant and the new covenant are fundamentally different in that way. There is still a reality to the physicality of these holy things, of communing with God in the physicality of these holy things. Okay, so this geographic reference here, we ought to take it kind of seriously for our lives. And remember what I'm saying is that what we do at church, right? The altar at church makes my altar at home holy. My altar at home and my church makes my heart an altar that is holy. It can extend itself, but it starts at the sacraments. It starts at the place where we receive the body and blood of Christ into our lives, and that allows us then to extend that life into the rest of our life. Isn't that cool? This is the whole idea, by the way, of being able to pray. I don't know if you ever think about it, but in the liturgy, there's a moment where, we've done everything but take communion, and we say, and now without boldness and without condemnation, may we call upon the name, and then we say, our Father. Wow. That's a profound statement. Profound statement. To be able to call upon the name of the Lord, our Father, right? Without boldness and condemnation, and without condemnation. So this is a profound matter, to be able to take that ability home with me, right? What it begins at the Eucharist can be extended to the rest of my life by virtue of our contact with the body and blood of Christ. Because his body has become our body. His blood has become our blood. And therefore we can call God Father. Because he's the Son of God. You get the point, right? All right. So let's progress on. We could go on and on about this. There's a beautiful, I'll mention it actually though. Hebrews 10:12 mentions that Christ says, but this man, Christ, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of God. So there's this idea of Christ and his sacrifice being all that we need as we go into this verse. May he remember every sacrifice of yours, and may your whole burnt offering be honored. Right? So this is what we pray for our King, for Christ. May your offering for me be honored. Right? May he remember every sacrifice of yours, and may your whole burnt offering be honored. Can we also talk about maybe for a second here sacrifice in our lives? If Father Jeremy was here, we would have a good hour just on this topic. But remember when I said sacrifice isn't about like picking my favorite goat because it's like the best one and it hurts extra, so I have to give it to God, and then they kill it. It's like, oh, bummer, he just killed my favorite goat, and I'll lose my favorite goat. No, it's actually finding the best goat to bring to dinner with God, like what you would do for maybe your grandma or something, right? You want to impress her. You want it to be a nice dinner. So you would pick your favorite goat. Well, in the same way in our lives, when we think about the sacrifice that we offer God, is not what hurts. That's what we often say, well, it was a sacrifice. which means it really hurt, but I did the right thing. Maybe it did hurt. Maybe it is hard to give God your best goat. But that's not why we give him the best goat. We give him the best goat because it's the best gift for dinner. Right? In the same way in our lives, we offer God our lives. We give him our best. Not what hurts, but our gifts, whatever that is, to ask him to come into our lives. Right? Come, dine with me in my heart. This is the motion of the Christian life. So we're not like, let me give an example. We're not fasting to gain God's approval so that we can go to heaven or something. We fast to show God we live for him, that our heart's his, that we want to live in a way that keeps him the front and center of our life. So that if he wants to come over for dinner, he feels like he's been invited. Does this make sense? So when we do prayer, when we do our morning and evening prayer, we're not like earning something before God. God already has everything. He doesn't need more stuff. And, what do we offer God? What are our prayers? They're for us, right? They don't make him, they don't puff up his ego or something. They're for us. But what do they show God? That we want him to come over. It's like getting your house ready for visitors, or like the prep that you do for Thanksgiving, right? I don't know, growing up, me and my dad would have to go get the tables out of the garage, and we have to be setting those up and take all the garbage out. All the garbage had to be out of the house because mom didn't like any garbage in the house. And then, my mom's cooking. My dad cooked too. That's not fair. Sorry, mom and dad. So mom and dad are cooking, and we're doing all of this. And some of it was work I didn't want to do. I'll be honest. I was a teenager. I did not want to do it, but I did it. So I guess it was one of those hard sacrifices. For my parents, they're excited because family's coming over. The whole house just smells like Thanksgiving. And now the whole house looks like Thanksgiving. And then when people show up, it's Thanksgiving. Right? We made the house for this moment, and now the house is full for this moment. That's what our Christian life's about. We're making a home for our God. We want him to feel invited. And so we're calling upon him, come to my house anytime you like, come over. And then when he does, we can sit down and eat with him. Because we have space. I guess the alternative would be, not being able to have a visitor. Somebody comes over to the house and we have to close the door and look out out the crevice of the door. Is I can't take visitors right now because I've left my house as a mess. Right? I don't want you to see my current situation. This is the way we can act with God if we don't care what's going on in our lives. And then when he shows up, we're like, oh, you're going to have to go somewhere else. You can't come in here right now. Well, this is what we're trying to do. And this is why Father Jeremy's book on sacrifice is called Welcoming Gifts. Because that's what a sacrifice is. It's a welcoming gift. Think most in America, what's the normal one? A wine. Somebody comes to the house and they feel obligated to bring a bottle of wine. Why? Because that's it's a welcoming gift. Thank you for inviting me to your home. Here's something in return.
Yeah. I think you said kind of a specific question about something you said, making our lives welcome for when God shows up.
Yeah.
The specific wording of that, is it different than the fact that God is always with us, and the fact, I guess the way I interpreted it was when we notice God is with us, but you said when God shows up, is that a different thing?
Yeah, good question. So the Father's talking two different ways, right? Properly speaking of God's nature, he is everywhere present, right? Filling all things. There's nowhere we can go where God is not present. However, there is the experience of God, the experience of God's presence. And this tends to happen in our lives in cataclysms. And they could be all kinds of cataclysms. I don't even mean just bad, but they're cataclysmic in the sense that the earth shifts on that axis. So I'll give an example. Would be like the first time I went to an Orthodox church. Now, I had a long way to go, I'll tell you. I still got a long way to go. But that first time is a cataclysm. I encounter God in a way that I didn't expect, and that God is palpably present in this way. He's always present. But in this moment, is it that I notice him or that he has noticed me? And the fathers kind of act like this idea, because we know it's not like God doesn't notice us. but there is a sense that we realize that his gaze has fallen on us. I don't know how else to say it, but it's not up to us either, because I can't put myself in that position. I can't pray hard enough or think about him hard enough and make it happen, which is weird. Like, I don't, what do we say about these things? I can't make that cataclysm occur. So that cataclysm, that apocalypse, that moment where God reveals himself and opens the curtain, God gets to choose when that happens. Boom. And if we're ready to receive it, then he comes into our lives. And it begins a new chapter. And oddly enough, it keeps happening in our lives. So like that first cataclysm for me, that was huge. It was huge. But it is not bigger than the others that have happened, I've noticed. And each time that cataclysm happens, there's this idea of, are you able to receive what I'm coming to give you? If you're not, he won't give it to you. Right? He'll take it back because he doesn't want to watch us fumble the ball, if that makes sense. He wants us to win. So if we're not ready, he'll keep it until next time, maybe, whatever. But this idea is that if our house is ready in that cataclysmic moment, then he can impart to us what we have. And then when we get it, because thank God he does it this way, it's when we're ready. So now we've got to live worthy of it. Worthy of it. You get what I'm saying? I don't mean like literally earning it, but I mean, God, you entrusted me this really special gift. I need to change what I'm doing. I need to live for you. And we do this over and over. This is why, like, for Orthodox, oftentimes in our own literature, there's always talk about like, convert and cradle. But in real Orthodox literature, we are always converting. There's a constant need to be won further and further and further for Christ. So does that, I think that catechism, that apocalypse, that revelation of Christ that happens in our lives, that's what I'm referring to when I say when God shows up.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and hopefully this isn't too tangential. I just want to make sure that my understanding isn't, incorrect in what you were just saying. But is that kind of like at the bounds of human logic to some extent?
Yeah, I think it's, what's funny though about it is it's actually very natural, though it's at the bounds of logic. So for instance, let's see okay. So I think for the most part we can have this conversation. This is like spouses and their love for one another, right? So we have days, they're just days. We're together, we live together. But then there are these moments in our romance, maybe, that a door opens up in that, right? That there's this new opening and new flowering of the relationship, often tied together with a lot of things. But I'm not just talking about emotion, I'm talking about everything it means to be married, right? I think this is the picture, because it's logical. It's logical that a spousal relationship would have moments like that. You can conceive it, but you can't make it happen. You can't concoct it. It's not just a feeling. It's an event of a reality that's dependent on the love of two people. Well, that's what's going on with God. He's a free agent, and we are a free agent, right? So we can do everything on our end, right? It's like maybe boyfriend and girlfriend. Like a guy can ask a girl to go out with him, but she can say no. Or she could say not today, but tomorrow. And so in the same way with us, with our Elder Emilianos is really big about speaking of the Christian as a lover and God as a lover. And this is a wooing relationship, a mystical marriage is what he refers to it as. And so this consummation of our relationship, right, the becoming one of the relationship is past logic. It cannot be mathematically created, but it's not past our experience. Does that make sense? I know it's wordy, but it's because I'm not trying not to talk about something in particular. Did I get it clear? Yeah. So
for me personally, it's always disturbed beyond discursive thinking when you stop thinking about it, that it just...
Yes. And yet you can't stop.
No, it's very hard to stop thinking. I mean, it's
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible.
What I'm describing is, it's impossible, but it happens.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think. That's a good way. It's impossible, but it happens. And in the same way here, it's within the realm of expectation, and yet it's not in anyone's control but me and God. Right? And what's the worst thing that can happen, right? The on again, off again situation where God's ready and I'm not ready, and then I'm ready and God's not ready, sort of a thing. I know I'm using metaphors, but there is still that element. Like we want our house to always be ready so that anytime he wants to come over, he can come over. Right? But then sometimes he shows up in our life and we sort of fumble the ball. We're like, oh. But sometimes that can be a way to wake up and go, gosh, I really wish I would have. This is like getting to Pascha and having like just given up on the fast for like 6 weeks. And then you get to Holy Week and you're like, oh, I should have tried. You know, it's like, oh, I missed an opportunity. You know, you're in it. You're like, oh, I don't want to fast or whatever. And then you get to Pascha and you're like, I really probably should have done that. Because we realize like, oh, God came with this special gift and I didn't get to keep as much of it because I didn't do what he wanted me to do, you know. Anyway, this is just, I'm trying to speak from my experience and I'm trying to triangulate it because I feel like in poetry, you know, St. Ephrem talks about this idea that like we can't define God, but we can go around him and then point toward the middle. You know, he's there, but I can't tell you what he is, you know, and this is the way it is for us.
Unapproachable, unfathomable, what else was it called?
Yeah,
It's
the
an A or something.
apophatic theology. Yeah, the negatives. Yeah, the way of negatives. Via negativa. All right, let's progress. All right. Okay, so as we talk about this idea of Behi, remember every sacrifice of yours, sacrifice